Good afternoon, family. Good afternoon. This is Tony Browder, welcoming you to another edition of the Browder File Show. And my special guest today is you. You're going to be with me all this show, and we're going to be talking about WPFW, and we also will be talking about this phenomenal new film that's been breaking box office records for the last 3 weeks. That's Ryan Coogler's hit film, Sinners. Well, before I get into my discussion about Sinners, I want to talk a little bit about WPFW and what WPFW means to me. As you all know, this is our spring pledge drive, and this is my second time participating in the pledge since I've been here hosting my show on WPFW. So I feel it's important for me to share with you, my listeners, why this station means so much to me. There's an old saying that you never forget your first time, and WPFW has been in the center of many first times in my life. It has been the source of many firsts in my life. I've done hundreds of radio interviews across the country and around the world, but my very first radio interview was done on WPFW in 1981. And I still remember that interview to this very day. I remember where I was. I remember what I was talking about. I've done thousands of lectures around the country, around the world. But my very first lecture in Washington, D.C. was done at WPFW when they were located on 7th and 8th Street Northwest. I did a seven-part lecture series called, I think it was called Journey to Enlightenment. And it was on my first trip to Egypt, 7 weeks. I think it was on a Wednesday or Thursday at WPFW, 2 hours each time. So my heart is connected to this station. The very first general manager of a radio station I met was Marita Rivera at WPFW in the early 80s. I've hosted and produced a number of radio shows over the years, but the very first radio show that I hosted and produced was at WPFW. It was a program called Journey to Enlightenment, where I had the opportunity to invite as my guests some of the scholars that I had the pleasure of knowing throughout my years as a researcher and presenter. I think my first guest was Stacey Hilliard. My second guest was Dr. Richard King. And it was a phenomenal opportunity for me to showcase with my community people who meant the world to me. And so the Browder File is the first radio show that I've had under my own name. This marks my 24th show here on WPFW. And so I can't help but feel that a great deal of my life has been connected to this radio station. That's why I'm so happy to be here and have this program. And I'm also happy to be able to pitch again during this show. I was quite pleased during our winter membership drive when I exceeded my goal for both shows that I was on, and I expect to do the same for this particular show. I have a number of people who listen to the show, who've read my books, who've heard my presentation, who've seen my presentations on the internet, and who share with me all the time how much they learn from me or how much knowledge they've gained from reading my books. And by me hosting this show, it's an opportunity for you to give to a station that has meant the world to me. So there's several ways that you can pledge here on the Browder File Show for WPFW. You can pledge online at WPFW.org. If you're into Cash App, you can Cash App at $ WPFWFM. You can call the 800 number at 1-800-222-9739, or you can text. You can text to WPFW-FM to 801-801. And I believe my goal for this show is $500. So I'm asking those of you who have enjoyed what I've brought to your household, to your community, to your school, to your organization over the years, whether it's been through my books, Browder File, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, whether you've done the Egypt on the Potomac field trip, or traveled to Egypt with me, or Ghana with me, or have participated in our Wisdom Wednesday seminars or any other activity that we've been involved in. Now is your opportunity to show how much you appreciate the work that I've been doing for, gosh, over 45 years, and make a pledge to the station, make a pledge to this program so that I know that you're listening and so that we can continue to do this work at a very critical time in American history and world history. What's truly interesting is that oftentimes people wait until their back is against the wall. They wait until um, it's almost too late to do the things that they could have done before, could have done when it was easier, could have done when you had more resources at your disposal. And so, again, I'm asking those of you who have appreciated what this station has offered, this community and the world, because there's so many people who can fortunately tune into this station online at WPFWFM.org. So if you value what these many programmers bring to you every single hour of a 24-hour day, now's your time to show your support. And yes, I do know the times are hard. Yes, I do know that everyone is being asked to make sacrifices. And you have to decide what sacrifices are worth you making. What's the value of those sacrifices that you make? And if you feel that contributing to this station will make your life better or will make the life better of someone that you truly care about, then I urge you to make a contribution, a tax-deductible contribution to radio-free radio here at WPFW. So what I want to talk about today is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. For those who know me know that I am an artist at heart, and as an artist, I appreciate good art, whether it's music, whether it's a painting, whether it's a performance. But I particularly have a fond appreciation for films. I love good films. And for those who have gone to films with me, know that I have a habit, whether I'm in a theater or watching a film at home, I've got a habit of watching the first 10 or 15 minutes of the film, and I can tell you the plot line. I can tell you how the film is going to end or what direction it's going to go. And 90% of the time, I'm usually right. And the reason why I'm able to do that is that I have a great appreciation for film making, for the writing of a film, for the direction of a film, for the art direction, for the acting. And all of these elements give me insights into the power of film. And so those who have been following my career know that I've done a number of presentations over the years on films that I thought were significant. For example, um, I really appreciated the film Avatar and did a dynamic overview interpretation of that great film and actually published it as a book. I've done presentations on Precious and The Butler. I think the last presentation I've done on a film was a couple of years ago where I combined two films in one presentation. I did a combination of The Woman King and Wakanda Forever. And whenever I discuss films, I discuss them from a variety of standpoints. Specifically, I discuss films from the position of an artist who has an understanding and an appreciation of film making. I've had the benefit of being in a number of films, documentaries primarily, and I know what goes into making a film. I've produced a couple of pieces. The last film that I helped to produce was the documentary on Runoko Rashidi a couple of years ago. So I have a great appreciation for the time and the energy and the effort and the money that goes into um, writing films, producing films, and promoting films. So when Sinners came out, 3 weeks ago now, I started receiving calls and texts from friends asking me if I was going to do a talk on sinners. And I was hesitant to respond because I've got a host of things on my plate. I've got, some travel I'm going to be doing this summer and a couple of other webinars coming up later this month and next month, and some other speaking engagements and other activities. And I didn't want to take another presentation on at this time, but I saw Sinners. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that I wanted to discuss this film because I think it is not only one of the best films of the year thus far, I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's Ryan Coogler's best film. So I wanted to dedicate this show to talking about the music and the music history of Ryan Coogler's Sinners. Coogler has had a phenomenal career over a relatively short period of time. He's a young filmmaker from Oakland who has written and directed 4 films. His first film came out, I think, in 2013, and that film was Fruitvale Station, about the murder on January the 1st of Oscar Grant. That movie received a great deal of notoriety, and it set the stage for Coogler to be recognized within the film industry. And so his second film was a film titled Creed. It was an extension of the Sylvester Stallone Rocky films, where he featured a story about the son of Apollo Creed, the boxer who was killed in a boxing match. And Ryan Coogler wrote an impressive uh, film about Apollo Creed's son and his journey into the ring. And based on those 2 movies, Disney and Marvel Films approached this young 30-something filmmaker who only had 2 films to his credit, and they invited him to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he wrote and directed Marvel's Black Panther, starring the late Chad Boseman. That film made film history when it was released in 2018. It was the highest grossing film of the year. It grossed internationally $1.3 billion. And the success of that film made Ryan Coogler the highest grossing Black writer and director in film history. What's also important about this film and this young man's accomplishment is that Black Panther was the first superhero film to be nominated for Best Movie Oscar. I think it was nominated for 7 Oscars and it wound up winning 4, which is something that has never happened for any superhero film, which speaks to the quality of this young man's writing, which speaks to the quality of his directorship and his vision for telling stories on film. So Ryan Coogler wrote and directed 4 films prior to releasing Sinners. And those 4 films grossed internationally $2.5 billion. So the essence of the film industry is show business. And as everyone who's in the business knows, show business is 5% show and 95% business. So this young man who's not who will be 39 years old this month, this young man has earned various film studios um, over $2.5 billion, and he's said to be worth some $25 million. He started his own production company, and with his production company, he and his wife run this production company, and they produced the film the Fred Hampton story, Judas and the Black Messiah, which was nominated for several Oscars. So Ryan Coogler is a true artiste. He is a phenomenal writer. And in the webinar that I'm going to do on Sinners, I'm going to drill down and talk more about this young man, his craft, in the film. But for the purposes of today's show, I want to focus on the music. Why? Because WPFW is about jazz and justice. It's about blues. It's about Black music that touches the heart and the soul of the listeners, you, the listeners. That's why it's so important that we support this radio station with our financial contributions. All of the programs support the station by coming and spending our time. We don't get paid for the work we do. We do it because it's not work, it's love. It comes from the heart. And so when I look at this film Sinners, I look at the investment the Warner Brothers Studios made in this young man who, again, is not even 40 years old. They spent $100 million on this film and then spent approximately another $50 million to market it. Ryan and the cast are traveling around the country, around the world, doing interviews, doing premieres, and that's all part of promotion. It's all part of the business end of filmmaking. What is important, what has to be acknowledged, is the fact that Ryan Coogler has made a deal with Warner Brothers Studios that it's a deal that's so phenomenal that only a few directors, white, Black, Hispanic, male, or female, have ever made in film history. Warner Brothers agreed to give Coogler first dollar gross, which means that he gets a cut of the film from the ticket sales, from the gross ticket sales, not from the net after the studio has recouped its expenses, has recouped its, approximately $150 million. Ryan Coogler gets his cut up front. And to make the deal even sweeter, this young man negotiated arrangements with Warner Brothers such that they will relinquish ownership of the film to him in 25 years. So in 2050, when Ryan Coogler is 60 years old, he will own this film. And this was important to him. It's important to him because, as I've heard him say on numerous interviews that I have watched and read over the past 3 weeks now in preparation for this show and in preparation for the upcoming webinar that I'm going to do on the film, Ryan said, and when you listen to him talk, it makes so much sense. Ryan said that the first four movies that he made, Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, and Wakanda Forever, those films were based on someone else's story. Of course, Fruitvale Station was about Oscar Grant. That film was about his story. Creed was about building on a character that is the intellectual property of Sylvester Stallone, who created and starred in the Rocky films. Black Panther films are the property of Marvel Comics and now Disney. So each of the films that Ryan Coogler has made over the past 10, 12 years has been about someone else, has been a story based on a story that he wrote that was someone else's story. This film, Sinners, is his own story. It's his own personal life about his family, his personal examination of his loved ones and the trials and travails of Black people who lived in Mississippi, who were sharecroppers, who were struggling to get out of poverty, who were struggling to get off of the plantation, who were struggling to feed their families and free themselves. So this was a personal story for him. And this story was so personal that he didn't want anybody else to own it. So this brother very strategically planned his moves and then executed them such that he was able to get these incredible deals from a very powerful studio, Warner Brothers. And so I've seen the film twice and we'll probably see it again next week in preparation for the webinar that I'm doing on the 16th of this month, next Friday. I've come to understand and see very clearly that this film, Sinners, is a cinematic love letter to Ryan Coogler's uncle, James Edmondson. And as I mentioned earlier, there have been a number of interviews that Coogler has done. Many of them are online, but an interview that was done on several weeks ago on April the 25th that actually aired on WPFW. It aired on Democracy Now! Is an interview that I would encourage you all to go back and listen to or watch the video of that interview. You can go to Democracy Now!, pull it up, and look for the April 25th interview with Ryan Coogler. And in this film, this young genius of a filmmaker, a sensitive young brother who wears his heart on his sleeve. He doesn't mind showing emotion as he talks about his films, as he talks about the loss of Chad Boseman, as he talks about the loss of his uncle and what his family members have gone through. This brother is a special soul, right? And this film comes out of his love for his uncle, James. And as he tells the story, Ryan is from a middle class family. His parents married young. They went to college. They were middle class. His mother was a social worker, and his father worked with the youth juvenile system, helping to keep young men and primarily young Black men out of jail. And so they were working class people. And he was born in Oakland, but as Oakland went through gentrification and it became too expensive for his family to buy a home, they wound up moving to a suburb of Oakland uh, called Richmond, California. Richmond, California is predominantly Black community. As a matter of fact, I was just in Richmond in February of this year. I gave a presentation there, and Ryan talked about the fact that after his family, his mother, his father, and his siblings moved to Oakland, his uncle James moved not too far down the street. And so when Ryan was a young man, he would spend a lot of time, quality time, around at his uncle's house. And as he tells the story, his uncle, who was born in Mississippi and moved to Oakland when he was in his 20s, his uncle, after work, would come home. He would listen to his blues LPs because this was before CDs. He would listen to his blues CDs and drink some Old Taylor whiskey. And sometimes he would watch the San Francisco Giants baseball games or listen to them on the radio while he's listening to his music. And Ryan noted that after a few drinks, his Uncle James would open up and he would talk about life in Mississippi. Specifically, he would talk about the blues and life in Mississippi because, as we now know, or as Ryan learned as he was researching this film, went down to Mississippi to study the blues. He went to the Dockery plantation where it was said that the blues were first created, first came into existence. Um, Ryan talked about um, what this discovery meant to him, and the important connection that I don't want to forget is that when Ryan began his film career after college, he spent so much time away from home, so much time away from his uncle, that he became homesick, and his uncle would often call him just to check in with him to see how he was doing. And Ryan mentioned that he had finished shooting Creed and was in production studio in LA editing this film. Now, his uncle was dying of cancer, and Ryan was quite perturbed with himself because he wasn't able to be there with his uncle as he was going through a serious health crisis. And he was in the studio when he got the call that his Uncle James had died. He was devastated. He wound up going to Oakland for the funeral, buried his uncle, and then had to get back to work to promote Creed when it was in the theaters. And then after that, it was Black Panther. And after that, he was just moving on and on and on, doing more works, advancing in his career, finding himself more disengaged from his family, from Oakland, from his family, from his friends. And so he said in the interviews regarding the creation of this film, Sinners, he felt this hole in his soul for over a decade and felt that he needed to honor his Uncle James. And he decided to honor him by by writing this film, Sinners. So when you get into him telling this story, I couldn't help but feel that I was eavesdropping on the laments of a young man who was still grieving the loss of someone that he loved, and he felt compelled to tell the story of his uncle, of his maternal grandparents and great grandparents and other family members who struggled in Port Arthur, Texas, who struggled in Louisiana, who struggled in Mississippi, working um, for subhuman wages and struggling to make a life for themselves and his family. And so this film gave him an opportunity to explore the struggles that Black people went through. The film takes place, I think it's in October of 1932, one day in the life of of two brothers, Smoke and Stack, and other community members that they partner with in order to open this juke joint and create a space, a safe space, kind of like WBFW, a safe space where people can come to listen to good music, party, and forget their troubles at the door. This was the only relief that they would find. And so, I was so moved listening to this young man talk about um, his journey to write this film. He mentioned that in writing Black Panther, he traveled thousands of miles to West Africa, to Central Africa, to study the history and culture and the languages of Africa so that he could incorporate this knowledge into this film, Black Panther, which was the highest grossing film of 2018. And then when he thought about writing Sinners, he went to Mississippi just to get the lay of the land. And as he drove through Mississippi, he couldn't help but reflect on the hardships that his family had to endure. He talked about one interesting conversation he had on an interview where he talked about when he was filming Black Panther. He was, his driver was taking him to the hotel in Byron, Georgia, and he drove through a cotton field. He said it's funny because this brother, in talking about his work, he connects it to music. He's a profound lover of cinema, of filmmaking, but he also has a profound love and appreciation for music. And he mentioned that growing up, listening to his uncle play the blues, that he thought the blues was for old Black people because that was the music that his uncle listened to all the time. And only young people like himself listened to rap music, listened to other forms of music. And he said he saw a poster for the film The Blues Brothers. And so he thought only white people and old Black people listen to the blues. He just didn't know. So when he began his discovery of self, and that's really what it boiled down to, a discovery of self, his driver was driving him through Byron, Georgia on November the 17th, 2021. And he remembers that day because that was the day that Dolph, the rapper, one of his favorite rappers, died. So he remembers that day as he was driving through this cotton field. He had the driver stop the car and he stepped out and walked into the cotton field and he picked some cotton, a few pieces of cotton, which he says he still has with him at home. And then he reflected on it. He's been wearing cotton all of his life, but he never took the time to think about the hands that picked the cotton, the hands that worked on some of these plantations, like the Dockery plantation, which is hundreds of acres, where the lives of these Black men, women, and children were controlled by the sharecropping system, and so they were modern day slaves. And on plantations, these plantations, some of these plantations were so large and generated so much wealth that they had their own currency. So the workers, the Black workers on these plantations, these sharecroppers, were paid with money, which the owner of these plantations made, and they were usually wooden coins that were carved, and they were paid with this wooden currency, which they had to spend at stores on the plantation. So it was the owner's way of circulating their dollars in their community and ensuring that the Black folk would never get out of their debt. So it was these oppressive systems that Ryan Coogler began to explore as he was thinking about writing this story, which ultimately became Sinners, that helped him mentally and emotionally connect with his ancestors. So it's the bottom of the hour, and I want to remind you that you are listening to the Browder File on WPFW. I'd like to also remind you that we are in our spring pledge drive, and I encourage those of you who haven't pledged already to do so. There are various ways that you can pledge to the station. You can go online to pledge at WPFWFM.org. You can cash app at $WPFWFM. You can call 800-222-9739, or you can text WPFW FM to 801-801. Make a contribution. Let me know you love what I'm talking about. You love what we've been talking about for the past 24 episodes of the Browder File, and you love what WPFW has been bringing you for the last 48 years. So it's all about showing your appreciation and continuing to support those people who support you and add value to your life. Well, to get back to it, Ryan was exploring the blues. And in this story, we've all heard the story, the legend about Robert Johnson, who was this famous blues guitarist that came out of the Mississippi Delta. And according to the story, according to the legend, he made a Faustian bargain with the devil, met the devil at the crossroads, and sold his soul to the devil in order to gain the talents that would allow him to become a phenomenal jazz guitarist. Robert Johnson, I think, only produced 20 some odd recordings before he died at the age of 27. This story has circulated among other blues artists, and it's a story that is symbolic and metaphorical, and and speaks to traditions of African people living in America, speaks to the traditions of enslaved Africans who worked in the South, who worked in the Mississippi Delta, who ultimately gained their freedom, limited freedom, became sharecroppers, and were enslaved to the sharecropping system, which was designed to keep them financially enslaved to the owners of these plantations, which I also sometimes refer to as concentration camps. But these people struggled, and in the midst of their struggle, they produced a music which came to be known as the blues. And this blues music allowed them to through song, through the playing of instruments, whether it was the guitar, the steel guitar, or the harmonica, or the banjo, this music allowed their souls to project itself outside of their body and go to another space where they would be free from the trials and tribulations of life, sharecropping, the pain associated with sharecropping. So Kugler opens the film Sinners with a brief monologue about music. And this monologue says, it's a voiceover at the beginning of the film, and it says, there are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true that it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. In ancient Ireland, they were called the Fili. In Choctaw land, they were called the Keepers of the Fire. In West Africa, they were known as griots. This gift can bring healing to their communities, but it can also attract evil. And so it was that premise that set the stage for this story about the blues, which is also a story about vampires. And the vampires become a metaphor for racism and white supremacy. So this movie is phenomenal in that it deals with music, but it also deals with American history, American culture, the same American history and culture that is being erased at this very moment. Coogler talked about the erasure of Black music. He talked about the fact that the blues music is the only musical form produced in America that has been one of America's most significant cultural contributions that is spread worldwide. He talked about the fact that this music, this blues music, was manipulated. The musicians and the music were manipulated by white record producers, white radio stations. And they saw something, just like the vampire Remick in this film. They saw something, they felt something in this music, and they wanted to use this music to expand their outreach to their community. And so what they wound up doing was recording blues musicians, but then stiffed them with the payments. They didn't pay them royalties, or they cheated them with their royalties, or they paid them in alcohol. Or if you saw the film Cadillac Records about the Chess Brothers in my hometown, Chicago, they paid them with Cadillacs. So these men were exploited. Now, these men and women were exploited. Let's not forget that there have been some phenomenal female blues musicians. And so as the story goes, white record producers would record these blues musicians, which they called this musical form race music because it was sung and produced by Black folks. So it was race music, right? But then white musicians would do covers of these blues songs. And these covers would go on to become country western music, right? It would go on to become rock music. It would go on to become popular music. So we all know that, or we should know that Elvis Presley, um, his musical interests were honed by him going to Black churches and listening to Black preachers, listening to Black performers, singers in the church. He copied that style. And one of his uh, first major hits was Hound Dog, which was first recorded by a sister. I believe it was first recorded by Big Mama Thornton. And if you listen to the original version of the song, Elvis Presley did not change much. The only thing that changed was the complexion of the person who was performing the music. He went on to make hundreds of millions of dollars. And the Black musicians who he covered received little or nothing. And so that story can be told about every major blues musician, male and female, over the decades. And so Coogler felt a need to talk about how Black people have been exploited in the fields, picking cotton, and in the studios, performing music and promoting their music. And so that examination of the music is so telling. And one of the most, not one of the most, the most powerful scene in that film takes place when the young blues guitarist Sammy, who's the co-star of the film, along with Michael B. Jordan playing the role of twins, Stack and House, right? When Sammy does his first number in the juke joint, he literally burns the roof off the sucker. His music is so transcendent that the scene is shot with Sammy playing, and once he hits a note, that note pierces the veil between this world and the spiritual realm. And ancestors come down from across the veil and begin performing in that juke joint along with Sammy. So for those of you all who haven't seen the film, shame on you. I'm giving away important aspects of the film, And hopefully I'm enlightening you so such that when you see the film, such that I'm encouraging you to see the film. And when you see the film, you see it through different eyes. You hear it through different ears and can feel the soul, the spirit, the power, the energy that this young man has incorporated into this phenomenal film. So um, this scene, in this scene, we see musicians from times past in Africa. We see griots playing their instruments. We see uh, a guitarist who looks like Fuzzy Haskins of Parliament Funkadelic playing a groove. We see someone from the 80s and 90s scratching on the turntable. We see hip hop dancers. We see young black girls twerking. We see the full experience where this young man, Sammy, has reached down up into the heavens and brought down the spirits of ancestors, past, present, and future, and brought them in one place where they were jamming and freeing their souls that night. And it was that energy, that transformative energy, which attracted the vampire, the forces of evil, who came to take advantage of this powerful energy that was being created and transmitted at this place. So, um, yeah, there's so much to unpack, and I would encourage you to not only see the film, and it's important. I want you to see the film because it's important to support Black filmmakers so that Ryan Coogler and other young Black filmmakers will have an opportunity to perfect their craft and tell stories that normally don't make it on the big screen. And this film, Sinners, was made to be seen on the big screen. There's so much that went into the creation of this film. I really don't have time to talk about it now, but that would be done at a later date. But it's important to support Black filmmakers, just like it's important to support every organization, every institution that matters to you and that brings you a truth that you can't get uh, with other filmmakers. Uh, just like WPFW brings you a truth that you can't get from other radio stations. So we have to, at this point in time, if no other point in time, we have to understand the value of supporting those institutions and organizations and individuals that have our best interests at heart and see to it that we are not going to be erased. See to it that our stories will be told so that the younger generations that come behind us will know who they are, will know upon whose shoulders they stand, so that they can stand tall and continue this legacy of telling the story of some of the greatest people who have ever walked on this planet. So um, I've been talking a lot, but I want to take a moment and invite a guest that I asked to come on to help talk about this film, to talk about the music associated with this film, and encourage you to not only see it, but to take somebody with you. And then, more importantly, after you've seen the film, to have a discussion about what the film meant to you, to have a discussion about your family's migration from the South to the North, or the East Coast, or the West Coast, or wherever your family may have originated. All Black folk, to some extent, um, have ancestry connected to the South. So this story is about our family story. I want to invite Cameron to mute yourself, brother, and come on and welcome to the Browder File show, brother. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. I'm well. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this space, this platform to have these robust and important conversations. Uh, it's an honor to be able to dialogue with you, particularly about this film, which I've been listening to your discussion about it, and everything you've said thus far just resonates with me. Ryan Coogler is a genius.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we need to, it's important that we say that and we repeat that because it's vital that we elevate and amplify his vision. Um, you know, so I appreciate you taking the time to do this and glad to be part of the conversation.
All right, but thank you, man. And as I reflect on this conversation that we're having right now, we had a similar conversation years ago when
Right.
you were at the University of Maryland.
That's right.
and he sponsored a seminar on Black Panther and invited myself, Greg Carr, and a couple of others to come out and
That's
talk
right.
about that film. So, why is it important as an academician? Why is it important that we have discussions about film? Aren't movies just movies? Why should we, or why should someone like you, a scholar and academician, create a space for a discussion about films?
Yeah, yeah. Well, movies are one of the primary mediums, especially today. And for a younger generation, I'm an elder millennial, and certainly for those folks younger than me, so much of what we consume through our eyes and our ears is a mode, a modality, a way in which we learn and we receive and we expand consciousness. Because as an educator, my medium is the mind, and I'm fundamentally concerned with expanding consciousness. And cultivating, that's what it means to educate, is to cultivate, which is to draw out, right? And so it's not so much a process of me lecturing or teaching someone else something they don't know as much as it is a matter of me fostering and facilitating and creating opportunities for people to evolve. And it's really ultimately about the evolution of consciousness. And so there's a reason why Ryan Coogler chose the medium of film. And there's a reason why he made this film and in the film talks about the power, as you were just speaking, of music and of images, right? In the Judeo-Christian tradition, they say faith comes by hearing, right? And so the media uh, and the medium through which we communicate our culture and transmit our culture intergenerationally is of vital importance. It's everything. There's no such thing as just entertainment, right? Without something being implied, conveyed, connoted, denoted, right? And so it's incumbent upon us, particularly as an educator, to curate and to pay attention and to be critical of what we consume, meaning what we are watching, what we are hearing, what we are listening to, which goes back to your point about the importance of our music, because our music, Black American music, has been hijacked in many ways, and this is part of the discourse that Ryan Coogler is articulating for us in this film, and also about in his own discussion about the film, because this film contains so many levels, as you know. There are discourses and there are meta discourses. There are dichotomies and there are uh, false dichotomies that Coogler is rendering artistically to provide us with a very rich and robust opportunity for engagement. And so when Coogler talks about genre and race records and the way in which the music industry use genre, right, to segregate, right,
Hmm.
the cultural production of Black folk from white folk and others. Well, the same thing was done in film, right? Because Ryan Coogler is a has inherited the textual lineage and legacy of Oscar Micheaux, whose films were defined as race films, right? During the same time that The Klansman was being, or what became Birth of a Nation was being marketed and promoted all over the country around the turn of the century. Um, and so there was always a response. And so I very much see Ryan Coogler, especially when you look at the arc of his work, right, from Fruitvale Station all the way to Sinners. When you look at the arc of Ryan Coogler's work, his body of work, in some ways he defies genre, right? He
Hmm.
can't be
Absolutely.
ghettoized, right? He can't
Hmm.
be put into a one box because he's done Marvel, he's done kind of docudramas like Fruitvale Station, and then he's done Sinners, and so he defies genre. So he defies that categorization that's meant to say, well, that's a Black film, or that's and delimit it, right? At the same time, he's making films in the tradition of an Oscar Micheaux, right? Who was very intentional about the kinds of images that and representations that were being produced, because of course we are living within a global system of white supremacy, right? Which is a reality, but I put it in air quotes because the term white supremacy is a rhetorical oxymoron. There's nothing superior about
Hey,
whiteness anywhere in nature, but we understand what that is when we talk about it in terms of the current and historical political landscape. So Ryan Coogler, there's not enough time.
Hmm.
And I'm looking forward to the discussion on May 16th because there is this is a masterpiece. This is truly a masterpiece.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, man. And I'm saying this not just because Ryan Coogler is a young black filmmaker. I'm saying this and I agree with you because, as you stated, Ryan Coogler is a genius filmmaker who happens to be black. And
That's
that's
right.
the point that we can't overlook. He's done what very few filmmakers, black, white, male, female, Hispanic, Spanish, you name it, have done. No one has possessed the talent or displayed the talent that he has displayed in 5 films. And the thing that's interesting that I appreciate about him is that in all of his films, he unashamedly incorporates elements of black culture, right? It's
Agreed.
nothing to shy away from. And in
Hmm.
doing that, he is validating, our essence, our spiritual traditions. I really appreciated Wakanda Forever. It opened with a libation, right?
That's right.
And it focused on the ritualization of the death of T'Challa and T'Challa's ascension towards becoming an ancestor. You don't see
Hmm.
these things on film, right? Well, I haven't
That's
seen it
right.
on film before.
No,
So what it does is it validates those of us who've had a great love and appreciation for African history and culture.
that's right.
And to see a film that made $1.3 billion talk about ancestors. And I will say that my favorite scene of all time is in Black Panther when T'Challa goes into the ancestral realm to commune with
Hmm.
his father. I mean,
Hmm.
that scene touched my soul. Matter of fact, I don't mind saying I was shedding tears
Oh
as I
yeah.
sat in the theater watching that
Yeah.
film because for me at that time I had never met my biological father, and I was
Mm.
just
Mm.
imagining,
Yeah.
what he was feeling losing a father who had poured himself into him. I was imagining what that felt like, right? So he is a filmmaker with a profound emotion and skill, and he has the capacity to share those emotional feelings skillfully with everyone who sits down to see his films. Look, man, we got a few more minutes before we end this show, but I want to take you with me in the overflow room so we can continue this discussion. But I want to ask you, what personally did you get out of Sinners? What scenes touched you?
Oh man.
What message or lessons meant the most to you
Yeah.
in this film?
Yeah. That's a well. Okay. So there's many. Obviously, there's so many levels and nuances, and you mentioned Black Panther, and one of the things that's consistent across Coogler's body of work is his intention, investment, and his passion for African spirituality.
Hmm.
And that is something that you see particularly in the Black Panther films and in Sinners. And so, when you think about one of the fundamental questions that Coogler is asking, I believe he's asking Black America in particular, is about this crossroads
Hmm.
metaphor,
Hmm.
right? And we begin when we see the film. We hear the voiceover talking about the power of music and this is why it's so important that we take back our music and stop pimping and exploiting our music. That's another discussion. Um, but when you listen to that and you see the opening scene with Preacher Boy, Sammy, holding, sort of deciding whether or not he's going to drop that guitar, right? Because I believe at the beginning and at the end Saul Williams, who plays his father, which is another, so many levels of meaning because Saul Williams is the son of a preacher, I
Hmm.
believe, in real life, and has turned away from that tradition to some extent in pursuing his own creative, right? So there's a little bit of double entendre happening there, uh, but Sammy is holding that guitar, and we don't find out until after the credits whether or not he turned away because the guitar represents African spirituality. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that in a lot of ways, what Ryan Coogler is offering us is a question to say, are we going to turn our back on our ancestry, on our cultural heritage, and on our indigenous spiritual traditions and practices in the name of or in order to continue to participate in a bastardized and manipulated and corrupted form of Christianity that ultimately does not serve our interest. I think
Exactly.
that's one of the fundamental polemics, if you will, or questions
Hmm.
that this film poses, and it's yet to be answered
Okay.
by
Well,
Black
look,
people in America.
well, I'm going to touch on that, drill down on that subject matter more when I do my webinar next Friday on the 16th. But look, let's put a pin in this conversation. For now, I've got to wrap up. I want to encourage those of you who have pledged or thinking about pledging to do so before my show ends. I don't know how many people have pledged or whether or not we've reached our goal. I'm going to accentuate the positive and say, yes, we have. And I want to thank
Yes, we
everyone
have.
who has contributed to our show. But I want to remind you that you can make a pledge to this station, to my program, or any of the programs here on WPFW by going online to WPFWFM.org. You can cash app to $WPFWFM. You can call 1-800-222-9739 or text WPFWFM to 801-801. So it's your support for this program, your support for this station, which keeps conversation and music and entertainment and information such as this available to you 24 hours. We need you. We want your continued support. And I feel we're deserving of it because you can't find this quality of information anywhere else. I was told I exceeded my goal about 10 minutes ago. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to let you know that I will be back next week. We'll still be in Pledge Drive. My guest next week on the 14th will be Brother James Small. We're going to be talking about the 100th anniversary, upcoming 100th anniversary of Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz. Brother James Small has a close connection with Malcolm, Malcolm's sister, who brought Malcolm introduced Malcolm to the nation. James is also the current president of the OAAU. He's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about the struggle. The week after that, on the 21st, I'm going to have Gina Page, the president and one of the founders of African Ancestry. Gina is special because it was Gina Page it was African Ancestry who Chad Boseman went through to find out his genetic lineage. And Ryan Coogler also went through African ancestry. So I'm going to have Gina on to talk about what it meant to have these two giants go through her company to find their way back to Africa. So the Browder File show is what I bring you every Wednesday. Our theme is Black Nile. We talk about the Nile. We talk about Nile Valley civilization. We talk about the history, the culture, the values of African people. And we all bring it to you in a form of love. So I love music. Everyone who knows me knows that I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. We end every show with Maurice White on his greatest album of all time, album that is 50 years old this past March. He talks about the fact that this thing that we call life is all about love. So live your life with love. Khalil, take us out of here. I'll see you all next week. This is Tony Browder thanking you all for pledging to my show, thanking you all for pledging to the station. Keep it up for another 48 years. Tony Browder out. I'll see you next week.
No beauty, you gotta make some beauty.
All right, good, good, good. Okay, so good, man. Thank you for that. I've got a couple of other folk who are going to come on and join us. Nkechi is texting me saying congratulations, thanking me for I took over for Nkechi. And
Nice.
this has been a labor of love, man. I've gotten much more out of the show than I thought. I see TJ Guess. Who is TJ Guess? I'm not sure who that is. Is that Mama McKinney? Unmute yourself and let me know who you are. Huh? Or maybe that may be the station. No, it's not the station. It's somebody else. I don't know who that is. But I'm waiting on two other people to join us, and then we'll continue our discussion in the overflow room. And all of this content will be on our YouTube channel. But other than that, man, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, brother. Just out here. I was in a meeting before this. I told my colleagues, you know, I'm trying to follow the wisdom of Bruce Lee's philosophy, in terms of being like water,
Ah,
right? Being able
fluid.
to adapt, fluid.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
water can be tranquil and peaceful like a babbling brook, or it can crash like a tidal wave, right? So
Hmm.
we're in that kind of a space where those that bend don't break. So, I'm trying to counterpunch, and parry
Hmm.
these punches.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's the story of life, brother. And those who
Yeah.
learn to do that early in life and do it well will become elders who can share how they did it with the youngins. Hello, Sanetta. How are you? You can unmute yourself.
I am well, excited to be here.
All right. Welcome, welcome. I don't know who TJ. We have someone else on who is showing up in my screen as TJ.
Hi. Yes, this is Tanya Jones. I'm sorry I couldn't get to my mute a moment ago.
Who is Tanya Jones?
Oh, Tanya, yes. You know what? I think I shared the link because I was telling people about this, and so
Oh,
I think
okay.
Tanya is one of my friends, and hey,
Oh,
hey, Tanya,
Yes. Thanks for
so-
inviting me.
all right. So,
George is in the house. George is in the house.
all right, and here comes Mama McKinney. Very good. So there was a third person who said that they weren't going to be able to join us. So Tanya, since you're here, I want to put you on the spot and invite you to come in and share some thoughts on Sinners as well. Have you seen it?
Well, I have not, and I've been
Oh,
saving it for this weekend with my son, but I really enjoyed the conversation, and it kind of gives me some insight ahead of time for the
absolutely.
things that I may not have picked up on. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and this way I don't have to, go see it three times. So
So
I
so
have
so you,
some
Tanya,
mhm.
let me ask you, you don't mind people talking about a film before you've seen it? That doesn't bother you?
No,
And so you said
no, it doesn't.
you're taking your son. How
Especially
old is
for a film this complex and complicated. It has a
hmm.
lot going on just from the trailer that I saw.
Oh yeah,
So I
yeah.
appreciate, the different points of view before I get a chance to see it.
Okay. So how old is your son?
18.
18. Okay. So just so you know, Mom, there's a couple of sexually explicit scenes in the film. But your son is 18. He's a grown
Okay.
man, and you all should probably have a grown folk conversation about those things should the issue come up. I
Hmm.
trust you're prepared for that. All
Hmm.
right. Okay, so listen, it's
Yes, I'm looking forward to
6:03.
it.
It's 6:03, and I see Mama McKinney is here, and Sonetta is here, and Cameron, you're still here. So I just want to get your thoughts, Sonetta and Mama McKinney. I'd like to get your thoughts about the film, what the film meant to you, what you took away from it, and um, and yeah. So Sonetta, you want to go first?
I loved the film. It was so, I know the word rich has been used many times, but that's it. It was, it had depth, it had everything to appeal to all of our senses. It made me feel so a part of everything that was happening. And I appreciated all of the ways that it made me love Black people even more. The relationships, the complexity of the relationships between the relationship between the brothers, the love relationships, the community relationships. Um, there was so much to chew on. that goes beyond what we were experiencing in the moment so that we could have conversations about everything and continue to think about what we saw. And is it what we thought we saw? Is that what he intended us to see? And also the fact that there was a question of invitation, what we invite into our lives, and the fact that we have to invite it. It doesn't just happen to us. We don't just experience these things, we invite them in. And so for me, that was a very significant point. I look forward to seeing it again. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to see it through fresh eyes. I don't like to know what I'm going into. I want to see it, without being influenced by other people, even though I appreciate the comments that people provide.
Any people in particular? Okay.
No comment.
No comment. Got it. Okay. So I'm glad Mama McKinney is here. Sister, can you please unmute yourself? Because I've got a question for you about the film that I really am interested in getting your perspective on. You are steeped in African spiritual traditions, and I would love for you to share with myself and everyone present your interpretation of the crossroads and what that means in traditional African spiritual society and how well you thought that was represented, if at all, in the film.
Greetings, everybody. Thanks so much for that question. I think, first of all, let me say, before the spirituality part comes the music and the dance. That's probably my first love.
Okay.
And so, but I'm gonna get to that crossroads question. I just want to say quickly, my daughter Nakinji came home and said, "Mom, go tomorrow. Don't wait, go tomorrow." And the only thing she mentioned was the juke joint scene. I guess she thought, oh, that's going to get her attention, which it did, and it's still, ooh. So, and that got my attention because it demonstrated so clearly how we pull on our traditions that we think are in the past and bring them to the present and take them to the future. And so they're all connected. And I think he showed that connection beautifully, absolutely beautifully. In terms of spirituality, I appreciate, Brother Cameron, your comments on the show. And I'm right there. So for me, when I saw the first scene, now it's not really the first scene, but the first scene with Sammy and the guitar, my question was, well, damn, what happened? What is it about him? Why is he holding on to this guitar so tightly? Of course, by the end of the movie, I thought that represented his inability to let it go, put him at that crossroads. And for me, it was a confusion about, I'm coming home to get some relief based on this belief of I'll be saved, I'll be helped. But wait, the person who represents the evil and the devil just finished saying the Lord's Prayer with me. Huh? And so to me, it was, am I really safe here? Is this really my salvation? And that was the crossroads. And for me, for him, he paused, he saw which way he had to go, and music, it's like he was listening, and music was his way out. So when we come to the crossroads in traditional African spirituality, and I see a couple of my sisters on here who are also steeped in the Yoruba as well as the Akan traditions. When we talk about coming to the crossroads, it's an important pivotal time in our lives, or in that particular point in our lives. And it's a time when we are taking in all the things that are happening, and we need to make a decision. And those crossroads are placed in our lives because it's a period of, it's a point of growth. Mm-hmm. Maybe depending upon the decision you make and the direction you're going in, it can be a serious point of growth and development. And so for me, and for what I saw in Sammy, you had already said what you were going to do, and it's like you got confirmation. It was validated. I'm going to follow my music. I'm going to do this music thing. It was so exciting. I'm going back a third time.
Absolutely. I just saw a post today that because of the increased demand for the film to return in IMAX theaters,
yes,
they have announced that they're going to bring it back to a handful of IMAX theaters next week for about 5 or 6 days.
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah, and that and that created an opportunity for me to have an interesting conversation with Atlantis, about the film because she thought that it was streaming. I said, "Oh no, this film is not streaming because Ryan Coogler is a filmmaker." And I showed her that Facebook post with Ryan Coogler where he talks about the different types of film and talks about IMAX film and what it all means. And she was blown away because she had no idea of the complexities of this industry and what Ryan Coogler has done to be able to shoot a film, a feature film, a period piece in IMAX, right? With IMAX cameras means that the studios value his worth if they were going to make that much of an investment, and that 20% of the domestic gross for that film came from IMAX theaters. So for them to bring, we're talking about at least $2 million in IMAX receipts alone, right? So they're making money off of film. And the beautiful thing about his deal is that he gets his cut up front, right? So this brother has positioned himself to do what no other Black filmmaker in history has done. And he and his wife have their own production company. Their first film that they produced was Judas and the Black Messiah on the murder of Fred Hampton. And what I found out that when Ryan was working on that film, he placed a call to our own Ray Winbush at Morgan State. And it flew Ray to Chicago and met with him in Chicago and had him share with them his knowledge of Fred Hampton because Ray was at University of Chicago during the time Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were murdered. And so he served as technical advisor for that film. So once I realized the commitment that Coogler and his team has to telling our stories and making sure that they're told correctly, my appreciation for him just went through the roof, you know. So Cameron, let me bring you back in for a hot second. Um, as an educator, how do you think people in the classroom can use this film to not only critique films, but to also discuss Black culture, African spirituality, and other things that are so crucial to us at this point in time in American history?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent point, and that is vital to the ways in which we transform this film into a teachable moment, if you will, right? Beyond the economics of it, right? I think Warner Brothers put 90 million into this in terms
Actually,
of
it was 100 million. They committed
100.
90 originally, but then they put in an extra 10 million. So it's $100 million.
So 100 M, okay?
Mhm.
And it's important that we say because part of the meta discourse of this film is Ryan Coogler owns his own masters after 25 years. And that's very important. And that's not, and it's also important to say that Ryan Coogler is one of the most financially successful filmmakers, period, not Black filmmakers, right? Because we always have to have this moment where we have to go back to Langston Hughes, 1926, the Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, right? Published in the Nation in 1926, in which Langston Hughes says, I'm an artist. And if Black folks like my art, great. if white folk like it, great. But I'm an artist and I have to have integrity to my artistic sensibilities, right? And my vision, regardless of what anybody else thinks. And so I think Ryan Coogler is sitting on top of the racial mountain right now. And it's a beautiful thing to see. I think to your question, Tony, if I were teaching this film today in the classroom, I would have to teach it um, through the lens of the frame of a comparative analysis, because I think that we can get even more out of this film if we compare it to Sankofa.
Mm.
I think there has to be a because there is a dialogue, whether it's intended or not by Ryan Coogler, I don't know, but I would be willing to bet that Ryan Coogler has been influenced by Sankofa, because when you look at the themes, particularly around African centered spirituality, around music, and Ryan Coogler has talked about Amiri Baraka, blues people. We've
Hmm.
talked about, I recommend people read a book by Albert Robital, Slave Religion. I think it was originally published in the 1970s, but it was republished like as recently as 2004, which deals with many of the themes that are being brought out in terms of the syncretism of African traditional spirituality and westernized Judeo-Christian religions, and its role in its misuse in terms of slavery and sharecropping, and many of the themes you were talking about earlier. But I think that we have to teach this film. We have to capitalize on its mass appeal, right?
Hmm.
Um, if we can do that, then we can take control of our narrative and our story, because what Ryan Coogler is doing in part is he's elevating African American culture to the level of mythology, right? We know that Black culture is America's greatest cultural export, period, particularly music, because you got from blues to jazz to hip hop to all, and you see that in that
R&B.
film, in
Yep.
that scene,
Hmm.
right, with in the juke joint, the scene in the movie with that juke joint, and the roof is literally on fire, right? Is that the roof
The
is
roof is
on
on
fire,
fire.
and it literally was on fire, right? And so we pierce the veil, and we also get in this film such an important conversation happening, as he does in all his films. Because when you look at, I put in the chat Coogler's anatomy of that scene, because it's such an important scene. And the New York Times does this series, Anatomy of the Scene, where they have Coogler talking about this scene in Sinners in the juke joint, and there's also one of him talking about the fight scene in the original Black Panther film.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
and those moments are important for educational purposes, especially because in those moments we get inside Ryan Coogler's head, and we don't have to speculate because he's telling us exactly what he was thinking in producing those films the way that he did. And in Black Panther, he talks about Pan-Africanism explicitly in terms of the costume design, and shout out to uh, uh, Ruth Carter,
Ruth Carter. Yep.
Ruth Carter, okay,
Hmm.
and another thing, if you look at it, Ryan Coogler consistently works with the same people, many of them, almost all of them Black, right? You got Ruth
Hmm.
Carter, you have obviously the tremendous cast of these films, and I
Hmm.
want to give a shout out to, oh Lord, of course, the sister who,
Hannah Bleacher
yeah, Hannah
does the
Bleacher,
production
who
design. Mhm.
who
Design.
created Wakanda, who created the world
Right.
of Wakanda in those films.
Hmm.
But in Sinners, I'm sorry, my sister who played Preacher Boy's romantic interest in
Ah,
the
yeah, yeah,
film.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Jasmine, I
Gosh,
think.
I
Jasmine. She was in Woman
Woman
King.
King. She was in the Woman
Yes.
King. She was in the Woman King,
Hmm.
and she's everything she's done. Now this is a former student. She's a graduate of the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. I knew
Oh,
her
get
when she
out
was
of
a
here.
senior at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and I'm telling you,
That's
she's brilliant. So keep your eyes on her
fantastic.
career. She is phenomenal, and she was phenomenal before this. But the world is just starting to find out. Lawson,
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Lawson, I believe
Jamie
is her
Lawson.
name.
Okay.
If I
Mm-hmm.
apologize if I got that wrong, Jamie, but she is doing just tremendous work. But you see the actors, you see of course, Michael B. Jordan in all of his films. So you see the intentionality, and so Sylvia Wynter, one of my greatest influences in terms of intellectuals, Jamaican a writer and philosopher, literary critic, gave an interview some years ago when she talked about the need for, in terms of education, for us to break free of what Carter G. Woodson was talking about in the miseducation of the Negro all those years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at that in the context of what's happening right now with the erasure, the attempt to erase black culture and history that we are experiencing at the moment. Um, Sylvia Wynter talks about the need for our education to really become a form of socialization. And going to see these Ryan Coogler films, I mean, all of them, but especially The Sinners, because this is the first film the first dramatic film that's not, because, Fruitvale was a documentary based on that horrible tragedy. And of course, we know Fred Hampton, historical piece. This is historical fiction in a sense as well, but it's more his pure creative mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we have to going to see Ryan Coogler's films is and should be in the future a rite of passage. It is a rite of passage for our communities and for our children, and that is part of the reason why they are grossing so well because it transcends. Obviously, it's universal in its reach beyond the Black community, but for us in particular these films are a form of socialization so that we understand who we are, who we've been in the past, and where we have to go. As our dear brother, the great historian John Henrik Clarke would
Mm-hmm.
to paraphrase, right? These films are helping us go get to where we have to go, because we have to grapple with these crossroads that Mama McKinney just mentioned. We have to come to terms with these crossroads, and we're celebrating this year as you mentioned, the anniversary, the 100-year, the centennial anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X, uh, who his life, if you look at the stages of his life, he was constantly grappling with the various challenges spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
throughout his life. So there's a way in which all these things I believe are connected in a deep and meaningful way. And the film, I think, is useful to teach on its own merits, certainly. We could talk about the sacred and the profane. We could talk about Black music, history and culture. But also in comparative analysis to films like Sankofa, which are also deeply committed to challenging Black folk in this country to come to terms with um, our condition
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
to transform it beyond where we are today.
All right. Thank you for that, man. Appreciate you. Um, I want to throw another topic out here for us to discuss briefly before we end this segment in the overflow room. And it speaks to where we are as Black people. There was a great article that was written in the Post last week called "Sinners is a Black Challenge to White Christianity," written by an African sister, Karen Atia, on April the 30th in the Washington Post. And she talks about, let me just share with you a couple of highlights, and then I want to get each of you to talk about where we are as we transition from a world dominated by white men who are now openly showing the world how racist they are. And that racism is expressing itself in politics, economics, and religion. And this is forcing a lot of Black people, particularly younger Black people, many of whom have not grown up in the church, to begin to see the church differently and also begin to seek other ways of spirituality. So Black people as a whole are at a crossroads right now. Will we continue to follow the religious teachings that were given Africans when they were enslaved, or will we find a way to revert to the spiritual traditions that were banned when we were stolen? She says the great pioneering Afrobeat musician Fela Kuti once said, "Music is a spiritual thing. You don't play with music, and if you play with music, you will die young." So, when we think of so many of the great blues musicians and R&B singers, they started off in the church and they brought that church sensibility into their music and transformed that music and went on to seek, fame and glory. But to me, it wasn't a matter of them participating in the devil's music. It was them tapping into the spirit that is associated with the music itself, right? It's that spirit that is important to us. And so she makes reference here. Let me find this last quote. Um, she says here, two quotes I want to share with you, and then I'll open the floor for a conversation about the next step of Black people moving from religion to spirituality. She said, "The Sammy's journey in Sinners is to follow his instincts, which draw him away from his father and into the full understanding of his musical gifts. That's a metaphor for the very real distancing and awakening happening among Black people in the diaspora. There has been increasing interest in returning to African spiritualities outside of the church. If Black people could use their spiritual power to defeat the hungry spirits of exploitation, colonization, and white supremacy, the world will never be the same." And I think that's where we are. That's where we're moving. So, Sonetta, let me jump to you and ask you your thoughts on this transitional period of Black people at the crossroads, a religious and spiritual crossroads. Where do you think we're headed?
A lot of self-discovery, introspection. Um, the veil is lifted, and people have a lot of questions about what they've been taught and how it does or does not serve them. And so I think this is a period of seeking, and it's still I get the jury's still out as to how our people will find themselves.
Jury is still out. Okay. Um, Mama McKinney, your thoughts, please.
So I'm gonna be a little unintellectual for a minute and say, hell yeah, it's happening, and it's been happening. It's been happening. Okay, in my opinion, it's been happening for a period of time, and as spirit has it, it works slowly. We don't see what's happening always on the other side, and then when it appears, we go, oh, but no, it's been happening. You all got to follow the steps. Let me give you two quick examples why I say that. So my aunt, who is now an ancestor, moved from the AME church to the Baptist church to the Sanctified Holy Rollers Church, where they actually baptize using oil in the same places that traditional African systems do. She looked at my son, who had some fresh medicine marks, and she pulled me aside and she said, "What is that on your son's arms?" And I said, how the hell am I going to explain this? I explained it. I simply said, well, he gets medicine and it's in the joints and blah, 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 because of the power of the joints. She said, we do the same thing when we anoint. Never judged, very curious. I poured libation for my family who are AMEs to the hilt. But when they heard me call our family's members' names, I've been requested to pour libation at every family event. Something touched them. They realized, oh, this isn't just weird stuff. This is real. You're actually calling on the people who we knew who walked this place. So I think it's happening. It's going to happen small, but I think we have to look at those small things that are happening and recognize that that it's happening. It's not going to happen maybe the way we think it's going to happen. And then individually, of course, we have people who are resisting. There are people who are saying, I don't want to go see this movie. It's witchcraft. Okay. No problem. You'll get
Mhm.
over it. Go see it anyway.
Okay. Thank you, my sister. I appreciate you. And I'm glad you stopped and pulled over to the side of the road. Looks like you're on BW Parkway.
No, I'm on 50. It's really crazy.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you for pulling over so that you can be a part of this conversation. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I didn't want to miss this.
Okay, thank you so much. Brother Cameron, your thoughts about how we transition from religion to spiritual traditions that serve us specifically.
Well, I think, you know, it's happening as Mama McKinney said, and we've been socialized to be afraid of ourselves. And I always say that other people know who we are. They
Hmm.
know who we are. We don't know who we are. As you and I have discussed many times, Black Americans suffer from cultural amnesia, and films like Sinners actually are traumatic because they create cognitive dissonance,
Hmm.
right? They force us to come to terms with who we are at the spiritual level, at the core, at our soul, which has never been relinquished fully, right? Um, but has been corrupted and obscured, right? And misrepresented, oftentimes in our own internal dialogue, right? And that's what you see. That's why I brought up Sankofa, because in Sankofa, you have the character Joseph, who's the tragic mulatto, if you will, and he can't reconcile his mother, who he kills, right, who represents traditional African spirituality, with his spiritual father, the Catholic priest, who tells him that his mother is the devil and evil and all of these things. And so you see that play out in his inability to come to terms with that. But that film is so brilliant because it portrays in the experience of that particular character what is happening on a macro scale in among Africans throughout the diaspora. We've been conditioned and told that who we are, that where we come from, our history, our culture, especially our spirituality, right, is uh is profane, is the devil, right? Is a sin, right? Meaning, theologically speaking, sin is nothing other than separation from God, right? Um, but I would argue that there's no such thing as separation,
Hmm.
because we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And so um, we have to reconnect with our stories. We have to reconnect with our culture, and it doesn't mean, by the way, that if you've been I grew up in the church. I grew up in the black church, the social gospel. I've been in Pentecostal churches, Baptist, all of that, AME, all of that. But what the black church meant and represented for us is not the same thing as what it was intended, right? And so it doesn't mean that we um throw out all of that, because ultimately all of those religious ideas have their origins in our traditions anyway, if you go back far enough. And that's another, you teach that all the time. But I think that we have to make it okay. We have to create space, and that's what this film does. We have to create space for us to have those conversations and to reclaim our traditions in the spirit of Sankofa and in the spirit of um, just African cultural history, and let people know that they don't have to participate in their own oppression anymore.
Hmm.
The last thing I'll say is, in literature, and I just reference this in the chat. In literature, there's a literary device called a chiasmus, and a chiasmus is kind of like a crossroads, if you will. It's an X, and the most famous one is in Frederick Douglass's narrative, where he says, you have seen how a man was made into a slave. Now you'll see how a slave became a man. So it's this reversal of terms, and I think that in a lot of ways we are we have to sort of identify the various crossroads in our lives. You could say we're at a crossroads right now in terms of the social and political landscape. Do we continue to invest ourselves in America, or do we decide to do something completely different than what's been done in the past, and pursue a different path altogether as Black people, right? And so I think we have to identify those things. We have to be able to articulate what they are, and we can't be afraid. We have to begin to teach and speak and live from a place of love, from that frequency, and not be convinced by others that our traditions and our spirituality and our culture is somehow, you know, demonic or whatever you want to call it.
That's it. Well, thank you for that, brother. Thank you all for adding to the richness of this interpretation of this film. And I think this evening we modeled what everyone in our community should be doing, going to see this film, having discussions about this film with your family and your church and your fraternity, sorority, or Masonic Lodge. Wherever two or more people are gathered, we should be talking about this film and how it can guide us to our next steps. We are at the crossroads. You're absolutely right. And where we go next should be determined by us. And we
Right.
can make that determination by having access with accurate information, even if that information makes us feel uncomfortable. So cognitive dissonance is part of the process of growing up. And we've got a lot of growing up to do. And if nothing else, the demons in the White House right now are going to force us to either grow up or die. There's no choice right now. There's no choice. So I want to thank everybody for joining us in the overflow room. It was overflowing with a lot of information, and I trust that when I post this on my YouTube channel later on this evening, others will benefit from the information that you have to share. So if anyone on the Zoom wants to reference anything that you're doing, if you want to give a shout out to the work that you're doing, give an email address or any information, you're free to do that now. Cameron, you got anything coming up, or Mama McKinney, you have anything coming up you want to share?
Well, I just want to thank you again, for creating the space and allowing us to have these conversations. It's so important that we do this for us, by us, right? And so I'm just honored to be part of it and to be among you all in doing this work. I teach Africana Studies at Cal State University Long Beach with Dr. Karanga, who many of you will know, and others. And I also work for an educational consulting company. So you can check us out online, and if there's any way that we can help you to, especially at this moment
Yes.
when our history is being denied, to bring that forward. I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out.
Okay. And for those who may not have access to the chat, if it goes on,
Oh,
when it goes,
okay.
so email
Yes.
address would be helpful.
n.cameron.akeru@gmail.com. Just like my name on the screen, n.cameron with a K, .akeru, AKHERU, @gmail.com, and I will reply to your email.
All right. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. Mama McKinney, anything
Yes.
coming up that you want to let folk know about? Appeal
Yes.
or anything?
Or as a matter of fact, yes. So Appeal is having Appeal Inc., and you can go to appealinc.org. It's right now in the process of having its financial literacy sessions, and we will have also we'll have also our historical cultural literacy sessions beginning in the summer, and Brother Tony definitely will be a part of that presentation in the summer. And Appeal is an organization that is working towards opening the first African-centered or Pan-African virtual credit union. And so if you haven't heard about Appeal, please look us up online, again, at appealinc.org. I do, on a personal note, Manqua Enterprises. I'm a restorative justice and restorative practitioner consultant. And so I'm always available to help people facilitate difficult conversations, as well as learn how to implement those practices, and always from an African-centered perspective. I'm also a member of the Council of Independent Black Institutions, and we will be having our annual Teacher Training Institute, which is named after Nana Hannibal Tyrus Afrique, and that will happen in at the end of July, beginning of August, July 30th or 31st to August 1st. That will happen in Atlanta. And so CIBI does have a website, a Facebook page, and a website, cb.org. So if you want information, you can go to either one of those places, or you can email me at Abena, ABENA, my name, at gmail.com.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
All right, and drive carefully. Sonetta, you have any information about film festivals, African film festivals coming up that you want to share? Or Caribbean
Um,
festivals or
well, the African Diaspora International Film Festival will be in August again this year at GW. I don't have the dates yet, but look out for that.
great.
And
Thank
the
you.
Caribbean Film Festival will be in June at AFI.
Great. Okay. Thank you
Now,
all for
Brother Tony, before we leave,
yes.
I'm going to plug shamelessly your auntie, because she is an end of life doula,
Mm,
something that many of folks in our community don't yet understand or utilize. She's also a member of Sankofa Emma. And of course, she's also a Yoruba priest. So when she does her doula, end of life doulaing for families, there's always that added African spiritual component
mm,
to it. And her husband is on here also, who's also a restorative practitioner in Baltimore.
mhm. All right. Well, thank you for expanding the family. And we appreciate that. You know, when I do my webinar on sinners next Friday, there's an aspect of the film that I want to talk about. It dawned on me as I was, researching Ryan Coogler's life and his film. It dawned on me that in every single one of his films, his 5 films, there's always a central figure in the film who dies, and he's dealing with grief. He's dealing with the processing of that grief. He's dealing with, and he acknowledges the ancestors. So Ryan Coogler, I feel, is being used by the ancestors who are downloading their knowledge into him in the films that he's producing, in the music associated with those films, so that he can begin to prepare those with ears to hear and eyes to see what is coming, what our future is going to be. And our future is all about returning to the ancestral ways. That's where all of this is headed. And it couldn't happen at a better time. Mama McKinney, you had your hand raised for a minute. You have something you want to offer?
And then I thought, oh, maybe I should be quiet, but I'm gonna say it since you asked, since you saw my hand go up. We talked a little bit about um, how Ryan Coogler, he's such an excellent filmmaker, and I just want to, I know we remember hearing in one of his interviews, maybe it was the one on PFW, where he talked about a teacher who saw something in him and said, I think maybe you should. For me, that was that was a teacher who recognized she may not have known what she saw, but that was the ancestors
Mm-hmm.
pushing him to where you need to be. And since then, he hasn't looked back.
Yeah, I don't forget the teacher's name, but he was in
He
college,
was in college. I can't remember her name either.
and he had originally gone to college on a football scholarship,
Yes.
and then they lost the money to continue football. So he was considering other things, and I found out that this young man was majoring in finance and business, and his English teacher
Yes.
saw his papers and said, "You should consider filmmaking." That had been the furthest thing from his mind.
Yep.
And so he shifted gears, went down to LA to film school, and the world has not been the same. And here's an important connection. I referenced this when I talked about Black Panther. He wrote his script for Fruitvale Station, and Forrest Whitaker, who is also an alumni of that same film school, got him the financing to do that film. And as Cameron mentioned, um, Ryan is true to his friends. So Hannah Bleacher, Ludwig Göransson, who scores all of his films. Michael Severin, I think is his name, who does all of his editing. They all were in film school together, and they move as a
USC.
team.
Yeah, yeah.
They move as a team. And so when Coogler got the chance to do Black Panther, he paid it forward and wrote a role just for Forrest Whitaker to thank him for opening the door. And here's the last thing I'll share because I got another meeting I need to go to with the Maryland commissioners. Um, Coogler was so moved by the death of Chad Boseman that he almost considered getting out of the film business. He said in an interview that Ta-Nehisi Coates had done with him on for Wakanda Forever. Yeah, I think it was about a 5 or 6 part interview series that's really phenomenal. He interviewed Ta-Nehisi interviewed Ryan for the first piece, and Ryan is talking about how he wrote the script for Black Panther 2 and sent it to Chad. And Chad told him, no, just send it to the studio. I don't want to read it. And then when he found out when Chad died and Ryan thought about sending him the script, he said he was dying then. He didn't want us to know. And then he thought about when he was shooting Black Panther in the scene at the waterfall when he was having the battle with Killmonger. He said that it was taking Chad longer to get set up for the next shots. And he was thinking, why is it taking him so long? He said he was battling with cancer then, but he held it so close to his chest. And as Ryan is telling the story, he chokes up and they pause for a few minutes. So here's a brother who is, a strong athlete, a man's man who's not afraid to cry, who's not afraid to show his emotions. Well, he talked about how what they learned from Chad Boseman and the strength that Chad brought to the set every day. He and Michael B talked about that. And when they were screening Black Panther at a theater in New York, um, um, gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Denzel. Denzel said he was coming to see the screening. And when he told Chad said, "Can I have a minute to talk to him?" I said, "Well, yeah, okay." And so at that meeting, Chad pulled Denzel aside and said, when I was at Howard University, um, you were asked to donate some money so some students could go to Oxford for a scholarship. Felicia Rashad had asked you, I'm one of those students. I would not be here if it wasn't for you. And Chad and Ryan talked about the fact that Chad carried that with him when they were promoting the film. He said he had so many opportunities to talk about, you know, this incident, but he chose not to because he was that type of person. He was that type of spirit. So Black Panther 3, they're working on that, and Denzel has a role in Black Panther 3. So it's their way of honoring Chad Boseman. So that film will probably be his best film. The brother's going to keep exceeding his cinematic greatness with each film, and he has a bright future. And all I'm going to ask is that you all continue to support him, see his films, and it's so critically important that you see his films or the films of any other Black writer, producer, director opening weekend, because that determines how long they'll be in the theater and how many theaters they'll be in. It's all about meat in the seats. Show business is 5% show, 95% business. So we need to support those in the business who represent us well. Let them know, show them that they have our back, and they will continue to produce films and scores associated with films that will transfer our spirits to a higher plane, right? And move us to the place where we're already headed. So with that, I want to thank you all for being on the Browder File Overflow. I will post this later on this evening, and I'll send out a link to everyone. And please share it with every Black life that matters to you. So this is Tony Browder. Thank you much. I'll see you. And a big shout out to Ryan's wife, Zinzi. So here's another part. I'm going to go into it during my webinar on the 16th. But Ryan first did 23andMe, and then he did African ancestry. But he had Zinzi's parents, his in-laws, to do 23andMe. Now, Zinzi's mother is Filipino. His father is a black man from Chicago. Her father did the test, and his DNA came back 1/8 Chinese on his father's side, his Y chromosome. And his family is from Mississippi. So Ryan wrote the Chinese into the story because that's part of his family experience. So there's so much about him in this movie that it has to be seen multiple times in order to get all of the richness that's in it out and understand what this film really means. But with that, I got to go. Thank you all so much. It was a pleasure. And I'll send you the link to see everything on the YouTube channel by the end of the day. So
All
peace
right.
out. You all be safe. Thank you so
Be
much.
safe, everybody. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Be
Appreciate
well.
it.
Bye-bye. Stop recording.